Is Yan next in line for the title shot, or did Deiveson Figueiredo just show us his level at bantamweight? Yes guys, welcome back to Fight Energy. In this video we're going to be looking at 5 things we learned from Petr Yan versus Deiveson Figueiredo from UFC Macau. If you've not seen a video from this series before, we put up these 5 blank boxes at the bottom of the screen. As we go through the video, we reveal one thing at a time that we learnt from this fight. Now, as usual, before we get into the 5 things themselves, we're going to do a brief recap of the fight, just because this fight was so good, it's definitely deserving of a recap. The technicality of this fight, the pace it was fought at. If you've not seen this fight yet, if you've just seen the highlights, I really recommend, after watching this video, that you take a look at the fight. You're not going to be disappointed. All 3 judges scored it exactly the same, 50-45 to Petr Yan. I actually scored it 49-46. I think I just gave that 4th round to Deiveson Figueiredo. But either way, it was a very dominant performance from Yan. And as a disclaimer, I am a big Petr Yan fan. I love the way that he mixes up his trips, his boxing, kickboxing. I just think he's one of the cleanest fighters in the UFC. So I was deep down happy to see this result. However, within the first minute of the very first round, Deiveson Figueiredo took him down. I was getting flashbacks from the Merab fight. I'm sure that Petr Yan was getting flashbacks as well, because he was the one actually involved in that fight. But he did some really nice work from bottom position, did the more damaging shots, got a really good reversal, and then from top position he ended up winning that first round. And then from rounds 2 till 5, Petr Yan just entered that flow state. We've seen it before, the way that he just seems to move in the matrix, slipping the punches, getting off his own weapons. It was just elite mixed martial arts from Petr Yan. And in my preview to this fight, I had said that Petr Yan's one of those fighters I think could become a champion again, and there's not many fighters in the UFC you can say that about who are still active, but Petr Yan's one of those guys, and from this performance, I stand by that comment. I was really impressed with him. Deiveson Figueiredo, what a great opponent as well. I love the fact that he's come up to bantamweight and been able to handle his business up here as well. It was just such a great fight. But other than Deiveson Figueiredo getting that flash knockdown on Petr Yan at the end of the 4th round, it was Yan's fight. He dominated it, dictated the pace. But we're going to get into all of this now when we talk about the first thing that we learnt from this fight, and that is the patience of Petr Yan. That was something that was critiqued heavily heading into this fight. The fact that in previous fights, Petr Yan has taken a bit too long to get going. He sort of takes a Lomachenko style approach of downloading the opponent's information from the first round or 2, which is fine in boxing because you've got 12 rounds to play with. But in mixed martial arts, when you've only got 5 rounds at best, if you make a mistake in the later 3 rounds, if you take the first 2 rounds off, you can cost yourself the fight. And I feel like Petr Yan was putting himself in real danger for doing that. The losses that he had previously on his record didn't necessarily reflect the poor level of performance, but a lot of it was down to him not being urgent enough, him being far too patient at the start of the fights. So one thing I wanted to learn in this fight was whether Petr Yan had addressed this, if he was going to be more aggressive, less patient. And the answer to this is both yes and no, and I'm going to explain why. Petr Yan started this fight more on the front foot, which does tell you that him and his team had decided that they're not going to take the first 2 rounds off. They're going to actually try and score some points, get ahead of the rounds early, which is great. At the same time, it wasn't aggressive, in-your-face pressure that we see some other fighters, but that's not Petr Yan. So rather than Petr Yan changing his entire style, he just added more techniques and more tools to his arsenal that would help the fact that he's a more patient fighter and prevent that from being a weakness. For example, the oblique kick that he was using in this fight, particularly from the southpaw position, this is a really good weapon against an aggressive come-forward fighter, like Deiveson Figueiredo often is. Just because it offsets their rhythm, it keeps their distance. They don't want to close distance so much if they know you're going to have that front leg chopping down on their knee. And I feel like he used his long guard much more effectively. We're used to seeing Petr Yan tucking up, taking punches on the gloves. But again, if you've got someone who's really dynamic with their striking, like Deiveson Figueiredo, you want to keep them as far away as possible. So by using this long guard and using his oblique kicks more effectively, he's able to complement the fact that he's a patient fighter. Because downloading your opponent's information is an amazing strategy, getting reads off them, getting the timing, but you don't want that to come at the cost of the first 2 rounds. So by getting these shots off early, the oblique kick, using jabs off the long guard, he can score points on his opponent whilst at the same time downloading the information. I really did read deeply into this because it was something that I was so keen on analysing from Petr Yan, and I was really impressed with how he started the fight. So the first thing that we learned from Petr Yan in this fight is yes, he's still a patient fighter, but he's always evolving, always adding tools to his arsenal that will make him a more dangerous fighter. So moving on to the second thing that we learnt in this fight, and I want to give some recognition to Deiveson Figueiredo. He's such an elite competitor, never gives up, and this is the second thing that we learnt. Deiveson Figueiredo is always dangerous. No matter how behind on the scorecards he is, he's always a threat. He's always got knockout power in his hands, and Petr Yan was very aware of that in this fight. Even after the first round, Deiveson Figueiredo, he did look a bit lost when he went back to his corner. I think that in the pre-fight talk about him taking down Petr Yan at will, making it look easy, when he got reversed in that first round, and when Petr Yan ended up on top, raining down some nice ground and pound, Deiveson Figueiredo had to really go back to his corner, have a little think about how he's going to approach the next few rounds. He was really struggling with the timing of Petr Yan, with the angles that he cuts and the shots that he gets off, but that didn't deter Deiveson Figueiredo from keeping coming forward, mixing up the takedown attempts, landing some big shots throughout the fight. Deiveson Figueiredo is an absolute warrior. He never gives up, and he's always dangerous. At the end of round 4, despite probably being quite confident that he's well behind on the scorecards, he dropped Petr Yan. I'm not sure if it was unbalanced or what, but the power was enough to get Petr Yan off his feet, and it just shows the level that Deiveson Figueiredo works at. He's got unbelievable championship mentality. That's why he won the title at flyweight. He came through so many difficult moments against Brandon Moreno to get his hand on the flyweight title twice. And since moving up, he's proved himself to be one of the better fighters in the bantamweight division. So despite the fact that Petr Yan was on another level tonight, Deiveson Figueiredo, he's still one of the best fighters in the bantamweight division, and he's always dangerous. That's the main thing I want to take away. Point number 2, the thing that we learned, Deiveson Figueiredo, behind on the scorecards, being outclassed on the feet, not being able to take his opponents down, he's still dangerous. He still possesses unbelievable power and unbelievable willpower to keep getting at his opponent. Now, before we move on to the third thing that we learned from this fight, I'm going to ask that you just take a second to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment down below anything that you noticed from this fight. So anyway, number 3, the third thing that we learnt in this fight, and it's about Petr Yan's confidence. Now, heading into this fight, I did have question marks over Petr Yan's confidence, whether or not the very best of Petr Yan was behind us, particularly after that Merab Dvalishvili fight. The fights before that he lost, they were close fights, so you can tell that he still had that self-belief. But after the Merab Dvalishvili fight, where he just looked lost, where he didn't know what to do when he got taken down, when he had no answer for what Merab Dvalishvili was doing, I had real concerns that Petr Yan wasn't going to be the same fighter after that fight. Now, normally you say that about fighters if they get really badly knocked out, or if they get dropped multiple times in a fight in an absolute war, and obviously that wasn't the case in the fight against Merab. But a fight in which you can get 50-45'd and just completely lost in a fight can almost have just as bad a mental impact on you. And I think we almost saw that in this Song Yudong fight, which was Petr Yan's fight after the Merab Dvalishvili loss. In that first round, he came out cagier than ever before. For a patient fighter, he looked extremely patient in the first round of that fight. But you could see his confidence grow. That win against Song Yudong, I truly believe that laid the foundation for the performance that we saw tonight. That win gave him confidence, more self-belief, and he brought that in buckets to this fight. Petr Yan from the very first round looked so confident. After that first takedown, getting taken down within the first 30 seconds by a submission artist like Deiveson Figueiredo, if you're not confident, then you could buckle in that situation. You're both dry. I'm sure his team told him keep it standing at least for the first couple of minutes, and to get taken down, but to remain so confident, do real damage from the bottom, be able to reverse the position, and then to end the round on top, just demonstrated how much confidence Petr Yan had in his own ability. He wants to be a champion. He wouldn't spend time in this sport anymore just to be a gatekeeper. He made that clear in the build-up to this fight. He's got his eyes on UFC gold. Confidence and your own self-belief is absolutely integral to that, and he showed that in his fight. If he'd come out in the first round just looking like a shell of his former self, I'd have parked that idea right to the side. But because of the confidence that he showed, the level of this performance, I truly think he can get bantamweight gold again. Whether it's against Merab, in which he'll need to implement a smarter, more aggressive game plan, or against Umar Nurmagomedov, who probably no one matches up to really well, and I'm sure that'll be a really competitive fight. I believe that Petr Yan on his night can beat either of them. So the third thing that we learnt in this fight is that confidence is key, and Petr Yan came into this fight full of confidence, full of self-belief, And that was just put on show when he entered that flow state, when despite eating some big shots from Deiveson Figueiredo, he didn't go into his shell, he came back fighting and won a really dominant performance. And that leads really nicely into the fourth thing that we learned, which is Petr Yan's ground game in this fight, particularly getting up after takedowns and scrambles and things like that. We all knew that he was so athletic, we knew that his scrambling was so good, but against Merab Dvalishvili, we just didn't see that. He seemed to accept bottom position far too much. He did get up a lot, but Merab just kept spamming the takedowns and took his willpower with it. And you can tell in this fight that that was something he'd been working on. Not just the first round that we've touched upon, but in later rounds he got taken down, and within 5 seconds he was back on his feet. His trips, they came back in full force. He was happy to get Deiveson Figueiredo on his back. Petr Yan's ground and pound that we saw against Jose Aldo when he won the title. That's the Petr Yan we need to see. That's what we need to see against Merab Dvalishvili if he's going to win the title off him. He can't be moving backwards. He can't accept bottom position. He needs to be really active when he gets taken down. The priority needs to be just get back to your feet. Don't try and throw strikes off the bottom unless it's to set up a sweep or something else like that. But Petr Yan's ground game really needs mentioning, and it's so important when you look at the opposition in front of him in this division. Both Umar Nurmagomedov and Merab Dvalishvili are going to attempt to take Petr Yan down. That's an absolute guarantee. And you can tell that he's been working on, once he gets taken down, back to the feet. If they get top position, be looking at little angles, getting your hips out and finding ways to get back onto your feet. I was really impressed with what he saw today. Look, Deiveson Figueiredo, he's a formidable fighter, not quite on the level of Merab or Umar, in terms of your wrestling at least, but if Petr Yan wanted to put into practice what he'd been learning in training from takedown defense and getting back to your feet, then he passed that test with flying colours tonight. So the fourth thing that we learnt in this fight is that the work Petr Yan's been putting into his takedown defense and getting back up to his feet is only going to serve him well when he comes up against the very best in this division. If he's able to combine this takedown defense with what we spoke about in the first point, which is that Petr Yan, whilst patient in his approach, has added new tools which mean that he's not going to be forced backwards, that he can be aggressive and patient at the same time, then the second fight against Merab Dvalishvili could look very different. And that takes us perfectly into the fifth thing that we learned, which is who's next for Petr Yan. And there was only one name on the lips of Petr Yan in his post-fight speech. By the way, his son coming into the ring, getting on his shoulders, getting emotional when he was asked what it means to him for your dad to win. I just thought that was brilliant. It was a really nice, touching moment. In a sport where there's so much heartbreak, a lot of nastiness, let's be honest, stuff like that is really nice to see. But anyway, the fifth thing that we learned is that Merab Dvalishvili is next if Petr Yan gets it his way. He made a good point that Merab had said that Deiveson Figueiredo would be the number one contender if he beat Petr Yan. And the fact that Petr Yan did beat Deiveson Figueiredo means that if you go off that logic, he should probably be next. But I'm not too sure. It does seem like Umar Nurmagomedov is next, by all accounts. I don't think anything's been confirmed yet. But if you're to believe the rumours and things like that, it seems like Merab versus Umar is next. In which case, I'm going to propose another rematch. I know a lot of people want to see Sugar Sean against Corey Sandhagen. Stylistically, it'd be really nice, elite kickboxing. But if Sean O'Malley's going to have one more before he has another title shot, then it should be against Petr Yan. Given how close their first fight was, that was one of the fights where so many people were shouting robbery. I'll need to go back and watch it. I'll be honest with you, I've not watched it for a while now. But it was a really close fight. Depends what you like, scoring, takedowns versus damage on the feet, I guess. But I do think if Petr Yan isn't going to get a title shot next, then he should be fighting Sugar Sean O'Malley in a true number one contender fight. So these are the 5 things that we learned. Firstly, Petr Yan has evolved. He's still a patient fighter, but he's added new tools to his arsenal, which means he can be aggressive at the same time. Second, Deiveson Figueiredo, he's always dangerous. Down on the scorecards, hurt, backing up, whatever. He's absolute box office. Fighters like him, who possess power up until the end of the 5th round, are one reason why this sport is just so exciting. You just can't blink. You never know what's going to happen. What a warrior Deiveson Figueiredo is. The third thing that we learnt in this fight is that yes, Petr Yan is back to his technical best, but he's also at his most confident. You can see the self-belief is there, and this is the Petr Yan that we need. Whether he's heading into a Merab fight or a Sean O'Malley fight, this is the Petr Yan that we need to see. The fourth thing that we learnt in this fight is that Petr Yan has clearly been working on his takedown defense, getting up from bottom position and reversals. They were all put on show tonight unbelievable performance from that perspective as well, and that will serve him very well at the top of this division. The final thing that we learned, what's next for Petr Yan? We didn't really get an answer to that. He wants Merab. A lot of fans want Sugar Sean. Who knows? It'll probably be neither of them, the way that these things so often go. But anyway, let me know what you think, guys. This is the 5 things we learned. We do this after every big UFC event. If there's anything obvious you think I missed, let me know in the comments. Let's get a discussion going, and I'll see you guys later.